Welcome to From the Ashes, the Dungeon Crawler Network podcast all about Ashes of Creation by Intrepid Studios. Bear witness to the rebirth of the MMORPG genre from the ashes of an industry that have left the gamers behind. I am your host, Aggelos, and we are back with another Phoenix Roundtable, which is going to be really exciting because I have all my guest hosts down here this week. But before I introduce all of them, I got to do a little bit of an apology to all of our listeners. We did not have a show. Well, this will be coming out on, oh my goodness, whatever date it is, 27th, the Monday. We did not have a show this week because of some medical issues with my wife's family, and of course she's not feeling well, so we tried to push it off as long as possible, but got to the end of the week and we couldn't record a show. So I apologize for that. I know I like to get a show out every week, but we didn't do any shows across the network last week, so I apologize for that. So hopefully you guys will enjoy this episode. Also want to give a shout out to our newest patron supporters, Ian Mance. Thank you so much for supporting us over at patreon.com/Dungeon Crawler Network. It means a lot to us. It allows us to continue doing these shows, and every once in a while, I get to do some fun things and practice and make these shows a little better. So thank you so much. All right, so we have an awesome cast today. First off, we have the founder of Ashen Foundry, Atropos. How are you, sir?
Doing great. Thanks so much for having me on the show, Jealous. I'm happy to be back on the podcast.
Awesome. I know we haven't had a chance to really get back and do some shows, real recently, so we're gonna have to change that and get you on here a few more times because we've been friends for quite a few years now. It seems. Yep. Very, very long time. So, and we just seem to follow each other from game to game. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, time. Us and the rest of the MMORPG player base. But yeah, no.
No, we just started. That's all. That's how it goes. And they follow us. We're the trendsetters. Yeah, following us. That's what I'm going to say to myself anyway. The other face you see down there, one of the guild leaders of Vengeance, that would be Sindbad. How are you?
Hey, doing well. Glad to be back and excited to talk about everything we got to talk about today.
Excellent. And finally, the guild leader of Sons of the Seven, that would be Telchar.
How's it going?
I like the beard you got going on, sir. I fallen with the no shave November.
I like the beard, but every time I pod with Telchar, I'm like always so jealous of his awesome guild swag. That logo just pops, man.
We put some time into it.
I gotta say, I do like his guild swag as well. I know we were talking pre-show about guild related things, and I'm sitting there going, "Oh, he's got all his guild swag and everything," and DCN guild doesn't even have a name yet. Dear heaven. Kind of hard to have guilds. I should just be like the nameless guild with like no name. Like that's the name of the guild going forward. I like it. All right, so we are here to talk about the Mighty Beard. So, I mean, at least Telchar and I are prepared. Sorry, Sindbad. I know. I was there. You shave once and it takes forever to grow back, and it's awful. But Intrepid Studios released another blog post, which was pretty neat because they pretty much said about in most games, MMOs and at least RPGs, taverns are pretty commonplace, right? It's just something that's there a lot of times. Like I remember going into a tavern in Baldur's Gate, like the PS2 game or whatever, and that's where you got like the first couple quests that led you out. Anyone play the Baldur's Gate for like the PS2? Yeah,
you just PS2.
It was PS. Mine was the PS2.
Get out of here.
Yeah, I know. You're one of those, original Baldur's Gate. I got you.
My avatar on all gaming sites is John Irenicus, so you could say I am a fan of the Baldur's Gate series.
Oh, gee.
Yeah, man, just put me in my place, and I just feel like a hipster now. Like, anyway. But while taverns are generally there, other than the first starter quests, there's not a lot of in-game functionality. They're just there. That's You start and there you go. Now they were saying Ashes of Creation is intending to change how taverns are going to work, and they want this to be a key focal point for community interaction. I have a list of things here to really go over, but it's fascinating what they're trying to make the tavern be. Obviously, the first bullet point is, as most things, you log out in a tavern, right? And you got yourself rested experience. Whatever. But they have a bunch of different stuff that we're going to talk about. But before we do that, they also released some concept art, and I love concept art. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So for the podcast listeners, obviously I'll have a link to the blog post. So I do encourage you to check this out. If you are watching this on Twitch or on YouTube, you will actually be able to see it on the screen now, just like right over there. One of the first concepts that they brought in was for now how do you pronounce these again? I think Atropos had it correct.
The Nakua?
Nakua.
I mean, that's what I'm going with. Until I am corrected from an official source.
It actually sounds pretty right to me. It's Nikua. And these were one of the sub-races of the Dwarven people. I mean, obviously you have the Dunar, which are the classical Tolkien-esque, hidden in the mountains, Scottish drinking people. And, you have those. And then they have this offshoot, which I thought was really fascinating, is they are kind of reminds me of like a Samoan culture or a Pacific Islander type culture for dwarves, which was really neat to me. So what do you guys think about some of this concept art here? I mean, they have 9 different images showing this. It's fascinating.
When I saw these the first thing I did is I went back and looked at the available data and what has been said about the races. Mm-hmm. You go back and look at what the Nakua are and what they represent. They kind of have like a artisanal crafting focus with, family-oriented kind of mindset, which when you look at that kind of culture in general, that's a pretty strong theme across the the Southeast Asian kind of culture area. The crafting thing is where they bring the dwarves in, which is kind of an interesting spin on it. Who knows what that ends up being in terms of like a racial benefit, but the backdrops for the scenes in this are obviously amazing. I hope that we can get that in game because that'd be awesome. So,
absolutely, and as you said, when you went to like the original Kickstarter and stuff like that, I guess I might as well read this for everyone who hasn't seen this on the official Kickstarter. They broke down the races, and the Nakua, their quote, if you will, is family, freedom, courage. Where the Dunar saw mountains as home, the Nakua saw it as a prison. How could they compete? How could they complete the great hunt inside a cave? The craft of their brothers doesn't elude them, though. They too are highly skilled artisans. Instead of jewelry for nobles, Nakua see crafting as a rite of passage and the advancement of family. So yeah, no, like it pretty much marked all of that with what you were saying there. It's just fascinating that they went with such a departure. And I play other games like ESO, for instance, or the Elder Scrolls series that take a fairly unique look at dwarves being the Dwemer in that game, which aren't even dwarves, they're elves. However they switch that around. So it was nice to see them take that you have the classical fantasy archetype of dwarves, and then you have this offshoot that really kind of gives a little bit of flavor to it. Sindbad, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the architecture on the Dunar or Dunir dwarves, it reminds me almost like of Aztec architecture, in a sense, the way that the pyramids are shaped on these different screenshots, which is kind of neat. Like it's almost like a very tribal feeling to it in a sense.
Well, if you're looking at the second list, that's those are Vec, which I guess are orcs, not even.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I think he's looking at the Dunar stuff from
from earlier,
from the most recent blog post, which I think might be a fast forward to your next episode that you're going to have. But he's peering into the future.
But for the
Farseer.
Nakua, Yeah, for the Nakua though, I actually really like the beach. It's kind of like almost like an island culture that they got going from. That's pretty neat. And like you said, it's a big departure from what you typically see, dwarves play out with. Almost doesn't seem quite as practical though, considering that they may not be able to swim or get their heads above the waves, just a few feet out on the beach.
I mean,
and I'm pretty sure Gimli couldn't swim. So
this is true. Kind of hard to doggy paddle when you got this tiny little stubby arms and legs. And that's how it is.
Brings up a point that I don't want to forget. If a node is run entirely by Nakua dwarves, the architecture is supposed to inherit its racial percentage or whatever for the city. I don't see any walls or defensive structures or anything with this current layout. Are these supposed to be freeholds, or are they supposed to be more of like a civilization level for the Nakua that they have for their cities? We don't know. So,
yeah,
right.
I think it's a good question, and that actually kind of relates to one of the thoughts that I had. I wasn't necessarily going to contrast with the Dunir, but since Sindbad went ahead and went there, I at least feel like I can mention this. There is a companion set of concept art pieces that feature the Dunir architecture, and I think it's really interesting that since they're both dwarven cultures and they both pride themselves on craftsmanship, the Nakua, in contrast, their architecture is honestly really primitive. It's wooden structures with like grass, thatched roofs, and very sort of, tribal. As you said, tribal. It's got all the sort of Pacific Islander thematic motifs to it, and I think that's awesome. But I think it is really interesting that like you see on one hand this branch of dwarves that are like the giant stone fortresses with the huge bridges and like the sort of Mines of Moria type vibe going on, and then this is like a big departure from that. The other thought I had is because they are putting an emphasis on the water-based side of the game in Ashes. They're going to have swimming and underwater exploration and ships, and that allows them to actually have real islands, which I think is cool. I think a lot of MMOs, if they do have islands, they're just like a zone that you teleport to, not necessarily like you have to travel over the water to get to them. So that kind of harkens back to some of the original MMOs where you had to get on a ship and travel to Kunark or wherever. So that's pretty cool.
Or Ultima Online, period, and just going around in a little houseboat. Now, I did notice a lore inconsistency in this blog post, and I'm gonna shout it out for everyone right here. It says a rosy-cheeked dwarf slams her ale down and challenges a behemoth of a Renkai to an arm wrestling match. How could you tell she had rosy cheeks? Because even female dwarves have beards. No?
It was a red beard.
It's a red beard.
Maybe their hair changes color for their emotions.
There you go.
She has it like braided so you can see her cheeks.
Maybe. Yeah, it just reminded me of the Lord of the Rings scene where a lot of people don't think that there are female dwarves. It's the beards.
I remember seeing a concept art with a female in it. Look at the races and classes to overlay on the Kickstarter. There's a female in the background that does not have a beard.
Yeah. I know. I've seen that too, and I feel like that's just a massive lore inconsistency. I don't like it. Obviously, the second thing that we have on here is the Vec architecture, which I know a lot of people have actually stated they've really like the idea of the Vec because they're very shamanistic in terms of their culture, right? They are the stargazing orcs, which seems to be kind of, again, a departure from what you would see as at least Tolkien-esque orcs are, Warhammer orcs, for instance. You don't really see them as the more shamanistic or any of that nature. I mean, maybe you will if you played some of the more modern games like World of Warcraft with their Farseers and their shamans, but
should read the lore snip for them too.
All right, I can do that. For the Vex, celestial purpose and fate are their words. When one stargazes, they find what beauty lies beyond our world. When the Vex stargaze, they find what fate lies beyond our time. Star maps, numerology, and prophecy are integral parts of each Vex life. Great leaders read the heavens, for how wars will go, which empires will rise and fall, and the Vec often ask themselves, are we too late?
Kind of a nihilistic but futuristic approach. It's cool.
No,
it goes with the concept art too.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad that you brought that up, because so many of their concept arts, like you said, you have that what looks like Aztec architecture, but near the very top, the way they're shaped and funneled towards the sky reminds me of places that you would go to stargaze, or possibly like, I know it's kind of hard to see it in one of these, but I think it's the first one, the one marked as number 1. There's these different lines in between the towers right there. Wonder if at any point in time there would be suspended crystals or anything like that in order to magnify like a very primitive microscope or telescope at that point.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. One thing that kind of begs the question is, since these are very kind of like, they're revering the heavens essentially as like almost like gods to be able to see into the future, right? What cost is there for that with them? Would they be a civilization that sacrifices people or their enemies to do that? Similar to how the Aztecs were.
That's what I was thinking. Well, they do have Aztec. The other thing I thought about in terms of the towers, right? Something that I really thought about from the lore perspective that they've given us on the Kickstarter. There's that little snippet. They talked about a lot of stargazing, numerology, and stuff like that. I wonder if these points, these towers at the top of their ziggurats, are standing points for measuring the movement of the stars. Because you know how when you look up at the night sky, and if you're not standing in the exact same position, was that star over there or over there? But by aligning yourself right in the center of those giant peaks or those giant standing towers, you would have a permanent mark going, okay, that star has moved from here to here to track planetary movements, because you're always at a fixed location.
It's how they check the solstice. That's how the ancients used to look at the solstice for stuff like Stonehenge and things. There's specific periods of the year that it matches up perfectly with certain parts of the structure. I mean, that seems like what the art direction is going for, is a kind of indication of some celestial event through the design of the overall layout. So,
right.
If that has a game impact, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. I mean, something they could do with that is actually, like with their legendary weapons or armor, you could basically make a map in the stars that you can only determine using these like different locations. Basically being up at these like ritual sites. If you look up, during certain parts of the year, for example, that could be a big puzzle.
Yeah. And you mentioned about stars and tracking. There was another game, and I wish I could remember which game it was, and it's going to drive me nuts. But they actually hired, I don't want to say an astrologian's not right, is it? No, that's astrologist. Yeah, astronomer. Yeah, because we don't want the one that's telling about fortunes. It's actually someone who actually measures stars. Yes. They actually hired someone to actually create a star map that would rotate with time, so you could actually navigate by the stars.
That'd be
in
cool.
game.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I wish I can't remember if it was like Dual Universe or something like that, but they actually had someone who was drawing a star map and designing it so that way it wasn't just a texture. You could actually look for points of interest in the sky and navigate by them, because they didn't have...
It's Elite Dangerous.
Is it Elite Dangerous?
Mm-hmm. All right. Elite Dangerous has the Milky Way galaxy simulated.
Awesome.
That's pretty cool.
I thought it was a space sim or not, but it was neat that they were actually trying to make it more than just a texture background for ambiance. They actually wanted it to be somewhat functional, that you could find a point of interest and then use that as a heading for where you were going. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we talked about what...
I have a quick thought about the Vec, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
That just sort of came to me as you all were talking. I really like their sort of cultural lore backstory. I think it's really interesting to maybe think about, maybe this is like thinking a little too hard about the lore, but I wonder, like, as a culture, how they would be able to sustain this like rich heritage of stargazing during, a very prolonged exodus from Vera, in which, the star signs or whatever that their culture was like so attuned to would, be very different. I guess we don't know where they are as during their period of exodus from this world, but like, are they in some place where they have the same constellations, or are they in a totally different realm? Or I don't know. I think that's kind of, to me, a little interesting if they have like some backstory about like how their cultural heritage survives while they're actually not on the planet of Vera.
Well, like you said, that would be interesting. If this kind of leads into the fact is this like extra dimensional travel or interplanetary travel, where the divine gateways just away, I'm thinking Stargate for some odd reason in my head, where you're traveling within at least a known galaxy, right? So that's fascinating. I mean, obviously they haven't told us much about the lore, which is why we have these questions. They're designing these things with lore in mind, but we, as the soon-to-be players, don't know a lot of it yet. So you're right. I know one of the things that I will bring up is that they made mention already that a lot of the points of interest within the map are going to be the ruins of the old civilization. So many of what we're going to see, like, yeah, we'll be able to build towns and cities, right? But they're going to be different from what towns and cities actually existed on Vara in the past. So we very well may come up to what was the old Empyrean Elves main city, right? But it's in ruins now from however many millennia or centuries or however long we've been gone. Time has just ripped it apart. So now it's a nest of dragons for all we know. It'll be neat to see how they're going to tie lore together with that, like being able to look at a map and go, that was once the capital city of, this elven empire, and now it's crumbling ruins. So let's go explore and learn more about the lore of the people that were in the world before.
Good segue.
Segue into...
Where would you start that type of exploration, Aggelos?
I would start that type of exploration in the tavern, and that's where we're going. All right, so obviously, outside of those images that were shared, which were really cool, we wanted to talk about, the big thing is the Mighty Beard, the idea of the tavern. Now, obviously, we said earlier that rested experience is something that will be there, but there's so much more that is going to be added to this. And I have a couple bullet points that I'm going to hit on. First one actually came from our very own Telchar down there. The idea of making taverns so integral to the gameplay experience of the players is going to see a lot of increased foot traffic to these locations, not just the people going in to grab their starter quest and run out into the world. Telchar, what are some of your thoughts? How is this going to affect taverns from other games?
So one of the kind of things that I've kind of seen the direction going is that there's going to be a limited amount of places or resources that to initiate something like a tavern system. A node will have maybe 3 or 4 plots total, starting at level, at a certain stage, maybe a town level. As it grows up to a metropolis, it could have maybe 10 total spots in an area, because you don't want to have a unlimited amount of access to the full-on capacity of the tavern. Otherwise, there'll be too many of them. The experience will be spread out. What I think will end up happening is the city lords or the mayors or whatever will basically get a writ of operation from some person that wants to run it. They'll have to pay fees to the city to run their establishment, and then they take their money from the patrons that come in. That gives them that prime location. Maybe this city is the main adventuring hub or the closest to some big raid area, or like there's always a battle happening for one of the castles. That tavern, because that guy chose to invest his time at that spot early and get the deed early on, now has an advantage over the other people around him. The proprietorship is something that's exclusive to his early movement. That scarcity means that people that really want to make a tavern happen will look at maybe moving out to a less civilized area and starting up, bringing in resources to fund their tavern and bringing in the activity at some far off node that's not really well popular right now, but they're going to try through their efforts and their friends to make that node popular and pull the market share away from that person that started off initially. So like I said, I don't foresee the game providing everybody in the game to have a tavern. Then otherwise there'd be taverns in every corner.
Is it confirmed that within like a node, like a metropolis type node, that the tavern would be player owned and player run? I mean, I know that they said you can set up like a tavern on your freehold if like you want to do that, but do we know that like the city tavern will also be like a player?
I suspect it'll be built into the same with this. The city planners will determine how many spots can be put to taverns, and then the person that runs that will be up. It's up to them to put put the money into it or upgrade that to its capacity, kind of thing. I don't, because like it's like guild halls. Like there can't be an infinite number of guild halls per city, right? There's a set number. It's up to the city to decide how many they want in the city. They're going to tax those guilds to have a hall or whatever. There's just kind of there's a market for it. There's supply and demand. So,
and it's funny that you mentioned that, because I know next week, as right here on From the Ashes, we're going to be talking about another blog post that they just released, which was the city hall, which kind of brings into a lot of this. But the idea of, I believe that when these taverns are made, I don't really know if the ones that are within a city are going to be 100% player run, or if there's going to be, like you mentioned, that was mentioned earlier, was in the blog post, they talked about selling wares and stuff like that. So I believe that people will be able to bring in like their consumable goods and sell them via an interface in the tavern. So like you could like stock the NPC tavern owner up with your goods, and then they would sell, at least consumables would sell. But I don't know if, like, it'd be interesting to see if they're going to allow you to either allow it to be NPC run or player run if you own a city. I just have a feeling they're going to keep city ones to NPCs and allow people to run it via the city management. And then if you want to run one on your own, you would have to then resort to the freehold system.
I think that... Go ahead, Sindbad.
I was going to say, everything that the blog post has said, everything they've kind of been pushing towards is player run, right? So I don't think that would be run by NPCs. I think it would be, whoever gets in that node first, basically that's theirs, and they can do whatever they want with it. To be able to keep there, they have to pay the taxes, of course, but like Telchar was saying, you'd have a limited number.
And if that person runs a bad establishment, doesn't have good beer, good music, whatever, doesn't have the stuff we're going to talk about in terms of like the tavern games, because they're not willing to pay the upkeep on it or whatever, people will go somewhere else. You're not forced, just because like the existence of a tavern is a nice thing doesn't mean it should exist. If there's someone that wants the opportunity to do it, they will find their way into that. At least that's why I hope that people would. So, but
interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like the taverns, like they said, the way that they're describing them is, I think there will be more, at least city taverns. Maybe this again would be something that could be dictated by the city owners, the people who are running the city, that it would be more of a free enterprise in that point where you could buy from the NPC merchants, or you could buy from the player run goods that are being sold in there at a cost, right? It's very similar to the market stall system that ESO has, where there's always an auction house cut. You bid on a stall, you lose that money if you win it. But then even when you're selling something, if you're selling it for 1,000 gold, there's always the cut that you're losing, which would at that point, either if it's owned by the city, go to the city coffers, or if owned by a player, would go to the player coffers.
I feel like they just to make sure that there's always that mechanic available. If no one wants to be a tavern owner for that city, it will be run by NPCs as default. The person, a mover could come in and buy, if the city decides to, if they've built it up over time and no one's ever claimed it, they could let that be out there as a deed to be bought by some entity, some merchant that wants to buy up the tavern and try to flip it into what he wants. But otherwise, the minimum functionality would always be there, just so that the grouping mechanic and the other stuff we're going to talk about in a minute will always be present for the people of the city to use, you know?
Right.
So.
I mean, even, and just to be clear on that, even player-run ones, you're not going to have a player logged in going, "Would you like a beer with that, sir?" Like, is that your fantasy life to be a bartender? Like, you're
Some
sitting
people
there.
like that.
Yeah,
Maybe.
that's true.
Like, I don't know.
I think they're going to go the route of like Star Wars Galaxies, where you can basically buy your own vendor and then place it in there. Like they said before, that you can hire an NPC to do that for you.
Right.
So I mean, like Telchar was saying, though, if you don't run a good establishment that has what people want, people are going to go find the other one that they want to go with. So I highly doubt.
It's just like hypothetical that I'll pose to y'all. So like, let's say someone wants to make a franchise tavern system. Everyone knows that this tavern is a place you can go to hire mercenaries.
Yeah.
They're always going to be there. There's always going to be capable fighters. There's always going to be people to fill PvE groups. That's because of the brand that person set forth from, you know that. And if you're just an adventurer going across the land and you don't notice the symbol of that, possibly a guild or that individual person's thing, their company, you know, hey, they're going to have the best food, the best items, the best buffs.
Yeah.
We're going there, you know, like it's like everybody likes their favorite, sit down restaurant.
Yeah.
It's not run by the city.
The other thing as well is that there's going to be a stock market at play in this game, right? Yeah. If this is completely NPC run where you can then sell products to the NPCs to sell for you, how does that play into the stock market? It would make more sense if it's a player run, player owned thing than, basically a value on your business and on your brand.
Yeah.
I think maybe, I guess in some ways I'm thinking this is really good because maybe I'm in for like a really pleasant surprise. I think maybe I'm expecting a little bit more limited functionality in terms of what players can do. I guess when I had read this stuff, I'd sort of thought, oh, the tavern's going to be like an NPC thing. The city hall is going to be an NPC thing. Like there's going to be like certain buildings of significance in every node. Like, oh, there's a node, that node's going to have a tavern, it's going to have a bank, it's going to have a city hall. Those are just like the amenities that any node has. And then the players are like having guild halls and player housing. And as far as like the stock market, I guess I kind of thought that was going to be more like for the overall node, not necessarily for individual establishments. But like maybe the scope of the system that they're building is like way bigger than what I've even imagined. And I'm just going to like have my mind blown. That'd be cool.
Well, I think that Steven is trying to make it that deep because that's what keeps people around.
Yeah.
It's in effect no different than a freehold. If it's someone bought that property early, put their claim down in some little camp, and from the very moment that the node flipped up to the option where a tavern could be built, was the first person in line and throws the money down. Don't you
think from a gameplay perspective though they would want to like on one hand guarantee that every node has a tavern? And
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like that minimum level, like there will be a tavern location there's a minimum requirement. The city people that decide the way the node will, fold out into its bigger sizes. The city planner, like they've talked about that before. Like the city planners are the ones that are going to be that choose how big like the town hall could be, like what its services are. That means the footprint increases. Like I was talking about before, guilds, the number of guilds halls that can exist. I feel like taverns is another commodity item. Market size. Yeah. They said that the market could be increased. Read the next blog talks about this. The market could be bigger to accommodate a bigger, cash environment. Taverns may, like if it's a bustling adventuring area, there may be a need for more taverns, because there's not enough room. Like, you go in and you can't really, it's just crazy because there's like 50 people standing around, trying to talk while you're looking for a specific kind of experience. People like different things. And I feel like what they're trying to do is be extremely immersive while offering benefit.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, it kind of reminds me of like any of the old Civilization games. I remember playing, maybe not even Civilization now, but it was a city builder, and there were certain criteria you had to meet, such as within every so many city blocks, you had to have a fire station or something like that, because otherwise your city would burn, and that was how it is. Like, it would even send you alerts going, all right, you're 3 blocks in and there's no police or firemen around, so this might not be such a good idea, of which I ignored it because I like to see the city burn. Anyway, but they're very well, like you said, the minimum for gameplay. They're, when someone's building up a city, there may be so many slots where it's like, okay, there's one city hall, there's one tavern, there's one this. You can decide now there's 12 other slots. You can decide what goes in those, but at the very minimum of what a city is going to be these X number of buildings that have to be here, and then you can expand out.
The way I foresee this being kind of a property game where deeds and titles mean a lot in the long-term financial flux between civilizations. One city might decide to make their population, like their hub, be all real estate for people, like the mansions that are inside the city. Another city may decide that they want a bunch of commerce stuff, like maybe warehouses. They've talked about there's going to be warehouses. That's up to the people that want to run the node, and allowing for free trade and commerce that comes through the tavern system brings in travelers, brings in new merchants. That kind of stuff may be a benefit to having more of them. So it's up to the group of people that's running each independent node that's competing against the other nodes around them to try to offer the most lucrative,
for sure.
place to settle. So
you could definitely see like a tavern deed in like a metropolis being worth, like so much more in the future, than it would be when you first start off.
Well, especially if, unlike houses and whatnot, if a tavern is something that both functions as a home for a person, as well as a potential revenue source, such as the NPC down there selling drinks, and you get a portion of that, of course that would be more, worth more, because you're passively getting income the more people that are, going through your establishment, buying food buffs and things like that. And this is actually something that I just thought of, which I think would be kind of neat. I know they're not going to have any kind of auction house system, or they're going to have guild stores and stuff like that. But what if for the culinary people out there, or the brewers and things like that, what if you could not sell your food at a normal guild stall or a marketplace? You could only sell it as a contract via a tavern.
I don't like that.
I think that there could be like a limitation on it, like maybe, I don't know what in terms of like commodity items, if there's going to be like, we need 10 bushels of grain kind of thing, that might be sold at a market stall from like a caravanner's perspective. But like a finished item, like, a finished cooked item, that may be up to the, I feel like that would be, it makes sense in terms of like what you'd want in terms of like if you're in a market, you're walking around looking at goods and stuff, and then some guy just instead of selling swords, he's selling hotcakes, like that's kind of cool. Like I like having that. Yeah. Hot pie, like they have the option of doing whatever they want. I feel like the tavern should benefit the output, though. Like, if you do it there, if the person's crafting that item there or making that stuff at that specialized cooking area, it works. It only works in there, and if like you take it outside, it spoils or something. So like, there's a reason to actually go to the tavern to eat or buy the food.
A different way they could approach it, instead of trying to make the instead of trying to force the player to sell their consumables at the tavern, they could instead approach it from the demand side, where like you give the player benefits for consuming consumables at the tavern. And if the benefit for consuming consumables is at the tavern, then anyone who's selling consumables would want to sell them at the tavern.
Right.
So like, instead of like trying to force it, you could just, make the gameplay work in a way that kind of generates the right incentives naturally.
The one thing they did say, though, was that voice chat would be active within the tavern. So do you really want a bunch of people literally yelling?
Well, it said it was going to be per table. It did, I think it said something about it. It's not going to be on like the whole thing, because otherwise it's just going to be people yelling "deck butt" constantly.
What I had been imagining, and maybe we're going to get to, I guess we're going to get to the like group systems in a bit. So maybe I'll save my thought. I'll save for that.
All right, we'll move on then quickly. But before we do, I got to say shout out to Javier Perez, one of the senior environmental artists. They followed us back on Twitter. So, hey, shout out if you're listening. Thank you. I don't know. I just thought it was funny because my phone lit up saying that they followed us back, and like that was pretty cool. Anyway, so obviously the two other points to have on here is customization by the owner of the building and varying music. But we're not going to spend a lot of time on that, because those are MMO mechanics that, yeah, they're cool, right? If you own a tavern, however you own it, you get to customize the way it looks. Fun for the home and decorators. Not so much fun for me, because I have found out recently that I have no sense of taste when it comes to home decor. and I probably shouldn't be trusted for that. But that's beside the point. And as well as varying music. I mean, other games have done that. World of Warcraft did that in their garrisons with their jukebox system. I know Final Fantasy XIV has one. So, yay. Cool. I like that. So, moving on to some of the more interesting things that are going to be appearing within taverns. Now, before we get into these, each one of these things, which is what we talked about kind of earlier, these things will be available at taverns, but one of the things that's going to increase foot traffic is not everything is going to be available at taverns unless they're in leveled up nodes, right? So like a small tavern, you're not going to have rooms for some of these other things such as, player run quest and bounties and battle maps and tavern games and stuff like that. That is going to be something that as your tavern levels up and that as you go forward, you'll be able to bring these new services in and therefore driving more people to come to you. Because why would I go to a level 2 tavern that I can't see battle maps if the one that's across the street can, right? Yeah. There you go. One of the first things being brought up is bulletin boards with player run quests will be something that's in there. Here's something that's fascinating to me. How are they going to do player run quests? The two questions that I have is one, again, this will come up probably next week. We'll talk about it, where city owners will be able to generate these quests, and therefore it would be then player run. But if this was from the individual person, Atropos walks into the Mighty Beard and he goes, "Man, that wombat back there just killed me, and I don't like it, and therefore I want someone to kill it and bring me proof of it's eating me. So get my wallet out of its stomach." And bring it back to me.
A
wombat wallet? Yeah, I don't know, whatever. And the thing that, in my mind, that I just cannot wrap my head around, player run quest. Everyone has these ideas, these amazing epic stories, but very few people actually can put that together. And then how do you reward that? Like, oh, you just went on a quest to Mount Doom. Here's 5 gold. Right? Because that's all I can offer you. Great quest, but, and then again, you'll have someone who goes, oh, pick up that penny, 1 million gold as a way of, cheesing the system. Like, what are these player-run quests going to be?
I feel like it's going to be requisition orders. We need 10 of these rare fish. Like, they're extremely hard to get. I'm willing to pay you this much as the bounty because we need them for the kitchen kind of thing. It's going to be like it's going to be task-based stuff. There may be some functional ones that pop up as like maybe a rotational or seasonal thing based on nearby kind of things where you can kind of modularly pick some drop-down kind of things for it. There's no way that they're going to be able to let people craft events because that's a backer goal. So,
right. Sindbad, what are your thoughts?
I mean, have you ever seen Fairy Tale? They have a guild board, right, where you basically can put up different quests for people to go on, different events, things like that. The way I see it being is more like mercenary work, similar to what Telchar was saying, but also like, hey, I have an enemy over here. I hit his face. Go kill him for me because I can't do it myself. I'll pay you like 50 gold to do that. Even just hiring like basically randoms to go ahead and help you raid another guild real quickly. Things like that. That could be a really easy way of, interacting with the community and helping get that help for you. But, it can also basically be used to, push the bounds of power essentially in certain nodes.
So Atropos, given that, what Telchar was saying with the requisition quest, go kill 10 rats. How do you think the reward structure is going to be? Like, how do you think this goal is going to be? And what makes this different from, say, Guild Wars 2's requisition system where someone's like, I'm paying 57 gold for X item?
I mean, that's a great question, and I don't know. What I
give you the hard ones.
Say, no, I mean, what I will say at the risk of being a soulless bastard and having all of your listeners hate me, I think of Intrepid's doing a lot already. They've got a lot of ambitious systems. I would prefer they just cut this idea entirely and not spend any time on it. I don't think it's a good idea. it's not clear to me where looking for group stops and, you know, seller stalls, market mechanisms stop, and bounty board stops, which I do think is a good idea, and we'll get to that. Mm-hmm. It's not clear to me where those three systems end and where player-run quests begin. I mean, to me, a player-run quest is either I want a group to do some content, or I want to buy some stuff, or I want you to kill something or someone for me. And like between those other three systems, I'm not sure what's left over for player-run quests, nor do I necessarily think it's a good idea for them to spend time on that system.
So one of the things that I had thought about this when I was reading the blog post is like they talked about the dynamic event system that's out in the world. They can easily add a pointer tag to basically someone who maybe basically what it'll do is if that person discovers that event, there will be a pointer as a quest, a help kind of thing, where it'll be like this. It's basically giving that quest as a bottled item that, let's say someone wants to, like, let's say there's like a dragon that's popped up and it's just walking around, you know, eating people outside. That is easily something that doesn't have to be populated beforehand, but as soon as that's become a discoverable event, or someone's walked or been, you know, basically it's become aware that it's out there, the population section for that quest board is like, I'm the person offering the bounty. Like, it'll basically be like, kill the black dragon, you know, whatever. It'll be like, that's the quest requirements. Like, and it's basically what the person would be doing if they were doing it themselves. It just transports that from being an in-person log to basically providing that for everyone to be aware of. So like, I don't see it being like, you know, except for maybe server level events, but like normal little stuff, I don't see it being like, goblins are attacking, everyone come. It'll be like, you know, what's new? You're going to go look around and you're going to go maybe ask someone at the tavern, has anything happened in the past 2 days? I've been gone. Oh, I don't know. I haven't checked the board. You go look at the board. It's like, oh, there's a roving band of goblins. And that's just a discovered thing. That's one of the random dynamic events that's part of the system.
Sounds like battle maps to me. I mean, I guess like we'll get to that too. It's just, it's not clear to me where one system what does this system bring that one of the 10 other systems that they're trying to do doesn't bring it. I worry, like, I love the boldness of their vision, but one of the things that just scares the crap out of me with Ashes is that I worry that they're going to try to do way too much, and I'm a little nervous that, you know, not all of this is going to be realistic to do all of these systems that you know that they want to do. And this is like 10 different systems just for the tavern, you know?
Yeah.
Like, they have to build an entire MMO full of systems that are, you know, that are just as rich.
In terms of a design standpoint, a lot of that stuff is just referencing other scripts. Like, if they're doing, like I was saying before, if they're doing the event, if they're going to make a boss happen because you went and made a bridge over the troll's nest or whatever, and the troll comes out, that is an event that the game has recognized as being live. It's a pointable event. That means that they could be something that system allows for. Like, it could be even as much, it could be someone carries that, they walk past and they run away from the boss. They're the only person that knows that exists because they're the only one that has that Boolean switch. But, you know, they didn't know and now they do know. They're the only one in the server that's actually come past that monster ever, you know, or whatever it is. Like, you know, the number of people, someone may just run away and not really feel like killing it. Somebody may want it dead because it's next to their freehold or something. So they go to the tavern. It'll be a kill quest, but that's a unique kill quest based on, there's no other kill quests like that out in the world because that's a unique little troll that's for this river. You know, that's the way I see it doing. If they're making the script for the event, it's a very easy concept of just adding a graphical menu to point to that event for a lore telling system like this.
Right.
The tavern bulletin board thing. So.
And to kind of play off what Atropos was saying, I don't see how the average run-of-the-mill player, the Sindbad, the Telchar, the Atropos, the Aggelos, going into there and doing a quest is going to make a lot of sense. Because I do know they said that quest items aren't going to be normal quest items. It's, you know, the idea of when you play more modern MMOs, you get a quest item, right? And it's actually marked quest item. You can't do anything with it outside of it. They've already said that if you have a task to go get... I don't know, deer steak or whatever, and you're going and killing these deer, you're right. You can use that as a quest turn-in, but they have other purposes. You could accidentally cook it up and you went from 5 of 10 deer steaks, and then you're like, man, I'm hungry, I'm going to cook some 4 of 10 deer steaks. Like, you can actually lose what you've made progress on. Now, I don't see how that's going to work for the average player going into the tavern, but going back to the city management, because you have a couple systems already in place for making these quests, say that you can dictate what task, because they've already said the quests are going to be narrative, which are the big story-driven ones for the server, task, which are like to go kill 10 rats, and I forget what the other one is. There was one more. I apologize, I can't remember right off the bat. But the narrative one obviously is going to be something separate and for the server, but these tasks could be something that are generated by the player government that's running. You're building a city, and just like any Sim City game, you know what resources you need. Lumber, stone, metal, whatever. Bear pelts, food, whatever to supply your taverns. That's where you have your set amount of system requirements that will actually be able to help, such as experience gain, because you can't dictate, Atropos is going to go in and I do a quest and I'm going to give you 10 million experience because I can just write a number down.
Right.
That can be auto-generated by the system, but the quest reward, say it be money or whatever, would come out of the city coffers, and you can put task in there and make it so it's like, okay, we need 10,000 ore. All right. Well, if we break that down into, 1,000 quests or whatever at 10 ore a piece, or however you want to break it down, you could set the reward, the money comes out of the coffer, and then the first 1,000 people to pick up the quest, it's theirs. That's the only way I can see these player-run quests actually working, is if done through the city management system.
So what might end? So here's a kind of food for thought. So let's say Civilization is a level 5. They need 10,000 stone to get to the break point to go up or whatever. Mm-hmm. They put out a request order to their whole market, and that eats up all the supply. There's none left. Some enterprising tavern owner that's off a couple nodes away may have been having listening or paying attention, or has his alt account and realizes, hey, that place needs stone. So what he does is he puts up, he's not a merchant, so that's not his main job, but on the side he wants to make a couple bucks. So he puts up a general requisition. I'll pay you a gold per whatever the number is, and that's just up to the person to decide. But he ends up basically becoming a new source for that, so that he can send that little bit in that he can in that quick moment of profit that he wants in that small period of time. Like, if it's a 2-day window or whatever to get the 10,000 stone, he could charge it. He could buy it for cheap from the local market and then take it in, initiate a caravan himself or something from his own node, send it in and offer it up to the other city for 5 times the price, So basically it's a hub for collection of anything. That's the way I see most of that system working.
Yeah. I think your narrative is a really nice example of really interesting, like, market-based gameplay in an MMO. I mean, I think that's like great type of gameplay that they want to encourage. But for me, those are market actions, and I would prefer that they try to handle market actions through the market system rather than through the tavern system.
I think the tavern is just an extension of that. The tavern's meant to be not just like a place where you go ahead and rest and kind of like interact with people, but it's also a small market hub as well. A lot of people will be interacting there, so why not make that part of the market?
It could be even more of like a word of mouth market too. It could be like you could be sitting there, I'll go back to my franchise tavern example. Maybe you have like an on-staff crafting expert that just is, he's not working right now. So he goes and sits off duty. He wants to sit there to try to sell his wares, and he's going to do group content or whatever. And someone's like, I don't know if I can join this group because I don't have a mace or whatever. I don't have this piece. And they're like, oh, well, we got it. You want to come check it out, kind of thing. That's a informative quest. That's not informative. That's not through a game mechanic. That's a meta quest. That's a meta quest. But you could also put up simple stuff like that, like an advertisement that's not specifically a reward-based one. Someone could pay to put a bulletin on the quest board that says, hey, Grandmaster Smith Telchar is in town this week. Come see him at stall 3-6 over at the corner, and that's not a accept, and it's checkbox, and then you go and you talk to me as a character player, and then it's done. It's just a piece of paper that somebody rips off the board and takes over. That's a quest with the way the wording of it is. So it's like,
I mean, if that's the way the system works, the board's just going to be full of like, you know, XXX is a.
You have to pay for that.
Yeah.
Dan, I gotta edit that. Atropos.
You gotta pay. You gotta pay for the board stuff.
I'm sorry.
55 minutes and 10 seconds.
Yeah.
I'll edit. That's cool. All right. Well, and to what Atropos is saying, my thought on this is, you're right. You have these multiple systems, and if it's all within the tavern, what prevents this from just being Guild Wars 1, where you have a hub that's in, you know, if everyone goes into, and then it's, you know, like one of those lobby games, right? You go into the tavern, there's your lobby, you go out into your instance. I know that's not how they're doing it, but that's the premise that I'm seeing in my head, is the way it will feel. We need to move on, obviously. This one's fun. Place and take bounties on corrupted players. This one I feel like is fairly straightforward, because, I mean, other games have done this, like what Telchar was saying, in the more meta way, where guilds would create a pool and everyone threw money in because they hate Sindbad because, you know, he kills people. And so we all throw money in a pool, and whoever kills him and brings us proof of that gets the money. I mean, that would be fairly simple solution at that point, right? Like, you could go in if you really want that guy dead. Some guy goes in, kills me. I go and write a bounty going, Sindbad killed me. I don't have a lot of money anymore because he took it all, so I'm putting 500 gold towards his bounty. Okay? He also kills Atropos. Atropos is a little bit more wealthy, and he puts things in bank, so he adds 1,000 to it, or 2,000. And, you know, then the bounty keeps growing until someone brings us Sindbad's head.
I mean, some games have mechanical tracking of bounties. Like Eve has a mechanical in-game system for bounty tracking, where, you know, it rewards the person that gets the killing blow. Some games have done, and then even also with it, also on Eve, there is a external to that as well reward system that some people do in terms of like some other shady crap, but like, you know, cryptocurrencies and stuff. But I think that they're going to end up doing a mechanical one, because they've already, I think that at some point, maybe I'm wrong, they've talked about how there will be a profession of bounty hunting that will have an ability to, like, you know, track players and stuff beyond what a normal person would do if you have taken that profession, but it does make you vulnerable to those corrupted players. I may be wrong on that, but to do that, they have to have like a mechanical system in game, I think.
Oh yeah,
to reward you.
And they definitely will. There's also on the blog post itself, it says groups can become bounty hunters in their spare time in order to help those in the nearby region by cleansing it of these corrupted souls. So from what I understand of that means like anyone can basically do it at any point as long as they accept this, and they could even be in a group to do it. You know, it could be like just a temporary thing for them.
Do you guys think? Do you guys? Sorry, were you?
You're good. Yeah, you're good.
Do you guys think? Do you guys think that players will have to like accept the bounty off the board first, or it'll be more like if there's an open bounty and you kill someone, you might get the reward even if you didn't know there was an open bounty?
So I feel like that there will be an open bounty thing. It may not be where it instantly rewards you. Like you kill him and then magically 1,000 gold appears in your pocket. If you just kill somebody and you don't take their head, you don't get 1,000 gold. You know, you don't take the scout back to the sheriff's office or whatever. That's the place that you actually get the reward. So if someone is just errantly, you know, it happens across a kill, they could check the public log and like, oh, that was, you know, Bonnie and Clyde, you know, that we killed. Let's take their stuff, you know, take them back, you know, kind of thing. So
what you're saying is decapitate everybody just in case.
Pretty much. You just carry ears.
Yeah.
Well,
I
mean, they're still corrupted, so
backpack full of heads. Let's see if anyone wants these.
Yeah. No.
Is this your target? No. How about this one?
Well, it's pretty obvious that since they're being corrupted players, right? That's something that should immediately have like a little signifier for them being corrupted. You'll then know that person more than likely has a bounty, so you can probably take it.
Yeah,
like should be
the way that like I'll use Eve again, checks to make sure people aren't like putting bounties on people that are not killers is like there's a global status kind of thing that get based on the police level thing. So if you kill somebody inside of a security area, it gives you a huge penalty to your status, and then people are allowed to place bounties on you. But if you kill somebody out in the open, nothing, no one cares, because like you shouldn't have been out there if you weren't if you weren't willing to get killed, like you shouldn't have been there kind of thing. So it's like a if there will likely be like open combat zones somewhere in the world where it's just like free for all, like no man's land, and if people are fighting out there, there's no penalty to your corruption. But if you're fighting within a civilized area, you're going to start taking that corruption level, and then it pops up as a thing that people can go to the sheriff's office, place the bounty, and then have it be out there for the people to collect. So.
Right. I mean, that falls into their whole combatant, non-combatant type system. If you're in that no man's land or a battlefield, you're automatically marked as a combatant and therefore have no penalty. One that's going to be kind of fun, the addition of battle maps with combat benefits for parties to strategize. Now, who wants to take this one first? All right.
So I had theorized this. We can go back and look at a old podcast, I believe. We're talking about a city hall structure that allowed for civilizations to plan out their battles and maybe have a functional table. And we thought it'd be cool if it was actually a physical thing where a spy might be able to come by and look at it and be like, that's where they're going, kind of thing. I think it's a pretty cool concept if it's going to be more PvP based, because that seems like what it's supposed to be doing, is kind of enforcing the more kind of combat, like civilization versus civilization kind of stuff, or guild v guild. So maybe there's like a big fight happening between guilds. They could on the battle map. It could be like red versus blue is currently fighting over here. You want to join as they're currently hiring mercenaries. It'll automatically kind of show a kind of general disposition, no details of course, but it'd be like across the river is red, across this side's blue. They're fighting. They have a siege in 3 hours. It's all public information basically, but none of the little details are there. It would be more general, kind of like you can take a lay of the land and be like, oh, there's nothing happening in this node. Let's keep on moving, kind of thing. So.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and this is something that I was thinking about, even from more of a PvE perspective, or I mean, any players. They've already mentioned. And this is something they brought in a later post, or that I'm going to kind of weave in here, saying information about what's happening in the world filters through a tavern. Do you think that these battle maps are going to be, I'm going to say account bound or player bound, in the fact that when you're at your map, you have your map? Because they've already stated that they're not going to use standard point of interest stuff on your maps. Everything is supposed to be kind of like, Telchar told me there was a cave somewhere over here. So is this a place that after you found a cave, you can go back to your map and mark it with like a pin on your battle map, so hey, this is a point of interest. It's a cave, a dungeon, or whatever. And this map will grow as you're playing. And as a type of mechanic, think Ancestry.com with hints and stuff, like when it talks about information. Maybe you get, like, while you're looking at your map, it's like the Ancestry with the little leaf thing that goes, hey, we found a possible hint for you. And you can look at it and going, Telchar says that there's a goblin camp here. Does that fit or not? And you could choose whether to accept it, which would then put wherever he marked it on your map, or you can reject it. Because they did mention in the blog post about people possibly setting up traps, going, hey, here's a point of interest, and you can put that rumor out there, and people can take that and go, do I want to apply this to my battle map, right? And if you apply it, it goes on your map, so you can actually, when you're out in the world, you can pull your map up, go, okay, I'm heading in this right direction.
I'd like for there to be a publicly diagenic map that's in a tavern that everybody has as a reference point based on the current civilizations, like Fog of War. Mm-hmm. It's not a very detailed thing where it's the Telchar's freehold is exactly right there. It's basically here's the zone of influence that we have currently. Here's some major structures if you go northeast on this road and follow it for 10 minutes, it's basically simple information. It's not going to give you any drilled down info. I think that you can that hint thing would be kind of cool for the battle map. Let's say you want to put the thing out there. Somebody could put like a public marker on that diagenic one and be like, there's a new thing happening here. That's all it says. It's nothing else. Like it doesn't actually drill down and like you can zoom into the map and be like, well, it's a mine or something. It's just like basically topographical nothing. It's just literally a
pin.
It's just a pin on a bend in the river, and that's it. You can choose to import that to your personal one, which would have more detail. But the one that's in the tavern, I think, should be everyone can see the same concept, the same layout. So,
but there are people probably like if Sindbad has a freehold that he is set up as a tavern, since we were talking about that, and he wants people to know about it.
Right?
Why wouldn't you put that pin on the map going Sindbad's all you can eat tavern, whatever?
Right.
Yeah, I think that's all like really cool mechanics. I hope that there is like a shared map, like you were saying, Telchar, and it's not just like people's individual maps or like group maps or something. That could be a cool mechanic too. But what you mentioned, Aggelos, about like the information coming into the tavern and that being like the point from which it becomes like disseminated to the rest of the node. Like I think that could link in with the event system too, because like when an event starts, there's not going to be like a system broadcast message. It's going to be like someone discovers that there's an event happening, and maybe they like sprint back to the tavern, and so they can pin it on the map and be like, "Hey, everybody, the British are coming." Yeah. So I don't know. I think that's a pretty cool system. I really like. I don't know if any of y'all play this, or maybe some of your listeners do. Vermintide is a great game, and I love like the Red Moon Inn, where you like gather up with your party, and there's like the map on the center of the table of Ubersreich, where you like choose your mission. It's like a more limited version of what this could be, but that has like a nice sort of adventure-y feel to it, and it's like a nice way to kick off a gaming session. I think that's hopefully the sort of vibe they're going for.
I think that maybe this is possibly written down somewhere or discussed at PAX. I use that term fog of war because that's what they gave me, and that certain things that if they're not interacted with by players over a period of time will basically fade from knowledge. Like it'll still be there in terms of like the overall layout, but things like, especially when big events or like tumultuous events happen, like the whole map could get like reset in terms of like the external areas beyond the main corridors of where people are walking. If there's a caravan going down this road every day, there's one passing by every day. It's always gathering that, it's refreshing it. But like if someone doesn't initiate a caravan to, some small town that's off in the woods that's, not really well settled, it could kind of fall off the map a little bit in terms of what's known around that. And that enforces people to want to go and kind of research that. And then this goes back to, I think we talked about before, like a cartographer type profession where their job is to provide reliable data to people on the map. So like they could basically, if a cartographer signs that that's a valid resource node and puts it on this public tavern, people can trust that. I think that'd be an interesting way of them monetizing their profession. So
your idea about fog of war is super cool. I really like the idea about certain areas in the game that were at some point known becoming like more wild again, but I guess, like, don't you guys think for them to effectively do that, the game world is going to have to be, like, super big? And maybe it will be. I mean, hopefully it will be. But, like, how many MMO zones do you guys know, like, the back of your hand? Like,
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is I'm not going to say it, but I don't know if it's NDA or not. So it'll be answered soon. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. And I think I know where you're going with that. In other games, it's the idea of how much real exploration is there, and fog of war. When we were talking about caravans and resource systems, if it takes you an hour tops to cross from one side of the continent to the other, how rare are resources really going to be? Who can't spend an hour carrying stuff? If it takes 5 to 10 hours, I know 10 might be a little whatever, but 5 hours, that's not something most average people can do in one sitting, and therefore the idea of scarcity is a little bit more, something that's going to happen, and that is the size of the world is important.
Also add in the ever-changing zone of influence system. I think that if civilizations are not maintaining their borders like perfectly, it could like that like it's going to be like kind of like it's going to be like a I don't know if you'll never play Eve, but they have like a map that shows like the overall change based on like captured area and stuff. But like, so if somebody lets a node fall from a 3 to a 2, that they're some zone of influence of the whole civilization. If it's like parented to a tier 6, if that drops one of those down, that shrinks. So like, if there's nobody else, if there's another civilization pushing against them, yeah. But if that just shrinks away and like there's just a void of no one really out there, and that happens for a long time, like maybe there's some random guys, some hermits out there kind of just doing their thing, but like in terms of like a massive level, you don't really know exactly what's going on. Especially because, remember they've said that every node will have its own story, potentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't know if that's going to be repeated, like we'll see similar things, but just in different colors, or if it's going to be custom to each one. That's we don't know yet.
So for me, like the way I kind of picture it is that you'll have basically your scouts going out from your node, kind of keeping tabs on what your borders are, because after a while, I mean, things like you said can change. Like one node next to you, like you said, could go away, and then without you really knowing it, you could have a whole new civilization on your border.
Right.
Unless you keep tabs on it.
Well, I mean, that's the case for any time you play an RTS. Like I remember playing Age of Empires 2, like, and I scouted and it puts all the enemy green player dots on my map. But then I don't send a scout over there. You get the fog of war. My map still has the green dots, but if I come through, all of a sudden the green dots may be expanded or are a different color when another civilization wiped them out. And I'm like, wait a minute, there was a green dot here. It's no longer here. It's just a pile of rubble. And then I look, scout a little bit. Oh, it's surrounded by purple dots now. Apparently, while I was not paying attention, purple civilization came in and wiped out green. So,
yeah, which tying back into the tavern, that's that information. People coming from other nodes to your city, getting that information from them. That's going to be a huge portion of building your map for the world. Basically that knowledge that they bring with them from the other nodes.
Right. Yeah, like a cartographer could have a sign, like basically a signet. It's a true one. Like it's not like a faked one or whatever. Like that. So get into that whole metagame. But like a person could be a traveling map salesman basically, and they go around and basically supplying relatively up to date maps on the world, and that's what they do. They just make a round, and then they're just constantly, providing taverns and.
It sounds super super awesome to me. I just like. To me, in order for them to pull that type of gameplay experience off. The sheer landmass that they're going to require would be like totally dwarf any non-space based MMO that has ever been released.
Right.
Like it would have to.
Oh, I agree.
I mean, we can do some order of magnitude number math right now if you want to. So,
I mean, we can.
So how many? Do you know? So there's supposed to be like 8,000 to 10,000 per server, right?
As far as like,
so they've said, but
they said their goal is 8,000 to 10,000 people, right? That's what they're trying to achieve.
Forgive me if I'm skeptical about that.
If you're skeptical, but if they end up achieving that, and there are 5 level 6 metropolises, do you think it's going to be an even 5% split of a fifth between all metropolises? Some will have more, some will have less. But I don't think everyone will be living in the metropolis. There will be people living in the neighboring outside ones and continuing on that. You can't have them be like just across the horizon. It can't be like, oh, well, there's another city or a metropolis that's next door. There has to be a minimum distance, right, for that to meet and to make sense. So obviously there's going to be land masses, but you can think about it in terms of like a radius from that outside point. What makes sense? It's not 100. I mean, that would be crazy. 100 nodes between metropolis, maybe 10. Maybe 5, but it's something probably between 5 and 20. So that kind of sets our overall bounds for a evenly distributed metropolis system, right? So what's a square roughly with a 5 radius circle evenly distributed like that? We can kind of see the landmass.
Well, even just like looking at the original Kickstarter video for it, when they're showing that map, like you get that sense that there's probably about 20 different nodes in a section, right? Or at least 10 to 20. There's quite a few. But there's also the ocean. There's islands.
Right.
There's many different areas out there, and then you also have the underground nodes too. Yeah. So there's still a lot, and then you have to consider as well. You don't have fast travel unless you have a scientific node, and even then, it's not really fast travel. So the way I picture it is that information will be slow moving. That you won't have to really worry about having these giant land masses necessarily to keep everything in the dark. Just because that information takes time to get to you, because there's no way to go really fast. You could basically not know about a civilization falling for months.
Unless there's like
information moves pretty fast on Discord, though.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
When between server forms and stuff like that, I think there's going to be a lot of movement and a lot of information going through. Like you said, an outside game means, but the meta way of playing it. But there still needs to be the world has to be significantly large enough for this to take place, especially with those amount of people. And I know when we say significant, we don't actually have a full size. Let's look at the Alpha Zero. They told us, what is that, 4 km by 4 km size, and I think when I looked at that based on even what almost everyone's played, Skyrim, that was the Rift and a few other little small areas. It wasn't like it's not a huge area. It's big, but it's not massive. It's like a third of the size of the original Skyrim map. But the original Skyrim map, you can walk from Markarth all the way over to Riften in an hour and a half tops.
It's 14 square miles.
14 square miles. Well, I mean, average.
All of Skyrim.
Yeah, 14 square miles for all of Skyrim. It doesn't take terribly long. How long does it take anyone to walk 14 miles in a straight line anyway? Depends on how well shaped you are.
You ask anyone who's played Skyrim for a lot of time, do you forget what's out there? Do you forget, if you start walking in a certain direction, what you're going to find? No. People who play Skyrim for a meaningful amount of time, they know exactly where everything is. So in order for there to be a sense of mystery about what am I going to find if I go down this path? Either the world itself is going to have to change, which would be a little bit weird, or it's just got to be so big that it's difficult for you to retain the knowledge of what's in a particular area.
Well, so the landscape might not change, but what the players are doing there will. That's I think the big mystery. You don't really know what other people are going to be up to necessarily. You're not really sure what nodes are going to be there developing, what dungeons have opened up, for example.
Somebody may have pulled the trigger on wanting to open a tavern in some little podunk town somewhere that you didn't know about before. That's the kind of thing you might discover, and that may not be public knowledge. No one cares about reporting that through the official system because it's some resource cost to do that. So, that's the kind of.
I think the type of thing that could definitely be feasible is if the geography and the the landmass and the POIs of the world are somewhat known, but what's actually going on in those places changes in a sort of dynamic way. There's an abandoned mine, and sometimes it's just totally abandoned, and sometimes there's a super powerful necromancer that's filled it with skeletons or something, and you don't necessarily know what's going on there unless someone's reported back recently of oh, this is what's going on at the mine. Maybe something like that could accomplish.
I feel that's how the dynamic event system will end up running, based on how the world change and reacts to the changes that it's done. That's the way my logical thoughts on that. So,
yeah,
right. All right. Final 2 points we have here to cover: tavern games to earn or to lose extra gold. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because they didn't give us a lot of information, but they did say there's going to be standard dice and card games as well as a couple of their own. This is going to be a topic that we will probably come back to at a later date, because we've already said that when we talked about tavern games and we had all that fun, that when we finally had concrete data, we were going to reanalyze what we said and how wrong we were. So I think both Sindbad and Telchar were on that episode, so be prepared, guys. So the last one that I think is kind of neat is having tables that serve as group finders for content. The thing that this reminds me the most of, at least from another game's parallel, was the Party Finder board in Final Fantasy XIV, where you could put up and I know it's a board versus a table, but it served the same thing. You went to a board, you saw a list of the groups that were available, and you could then join those groups from there, or message the people and say, yeah, I'll go along, because you could write a little excerpt of what you were planning on doing. And I foresee that I don't foresee like a hall of tables that have 8 slots on them, and you can look, go, all right, that one has 7, that has 6, or whatever, without knowing what they're trying to do. Right? Like, that just wouldn't make sense. You're not going to go up to a table, walk into the table. Maybe this is something they have, but I'm thinking from a gameplay perspective. Like, I'm not going to walk up to a table with 6 players. Hey, guys, what are you guys doing? Oh, we're doing PvP something or another. Oh, well, that's not what I want. I was just looking for dungeons. See you later, guys. And go to the next table. And I think there's going to be something similar, maybe one table that has boards and stuff, and you could talk to and see a list of the groups that are forming and join groups or send messages from them.
I personally would like to see it be like a physically based thing like that, but you'd need some kind of where it's actually a table that a group has to sit at. But they would have to have some kind of way of having an announcement for what that group is intentions. Maybe
why not
a little flag or something that they put up, like this is PvP, or like it has a specific announcement that you can walk by it, or from the beginning open up possibly a UI and be like, there are 15 tables right now. This one has 3 of 5. This one has 3 of 10. Blah blah blah. And it's like a little jot of what their intentions are, or like what they're seeking. You can't join it from that. You can't just be like join group or whatever. You have to actually go up and sit down and do that. The purpose for that is that it opens up a little bit more of that old way of meeting new people.
Socialization.
It forces people to interact and make possibly new friends. The friends that are already out there won't need this grouping system. They'll just use the interface to, okay, we're full, let's go, kind of thing. But if people are missing or want to go and meet new people, they can go sit down, be a freelance tank or something like that. And kind of to spin off on that is having the physical tables. You should be able to identify through either a graphical UI, a nameplate above their head or whatever, what class that person is, like their indication of what they are. You might be able to identify what kind of gear level they have based on what they're wearing, their character level, maybe accomplishments, guild, that kind of stuff, that you can see what they're doing just by a glance. Like that, me personally, like imagine going into a tavern and you have like a group, you see people, there's like, a couple rogues sitting at a table and they're looking for a PvP or whatever. You're like, okay, you keep on going down and you get towards like the one next to like the big hearth or whatever, and there's like this just epically geared tank and a healer sitting there looking for DPS. It's like, oh let's go, kind of thing. That, like it's just like a cool way of reaching out to people that normally you would do through that kind of absentee process of just pressing a button, let's go, my role kind of thing. It makes it be a little more visceral, and that's what I think games are missing these days, is that visceral experience that really ties you to and makes that memory stick. Especially if something happens with that group of people that was really interesting. Like it's like, oh, I remember I went to this tavern before and met my now best friend on the game 3 years ago, whatever, like it's more impactful like that. So
yeah, it is. And if you look at other games that were once in many people's minds really great, like vanilla WoW, like you actually had to go down to the dungeon. You couldn't just
you had to go to the summoning stone before you could go in. Yeah, made sense.
That adds a meaningfulness to what you're doing. It's not as simple as just, okay, I'm just going to run through this today. And that's all I'm doing. You have to actually go do it. Which is awesome to me. That to me helps me get into character, helps for my role play, helps for like you said, Telchar, building friendships out of like random stranger encounters. It'd be awesome. I would hope that they would do it like that.
I know another MMO developer coined this phrase, and while I hate the phrase because I know what it's for, it does make sense. It's called creating meaningful downtime, and that gathering process, that having to go to a table to form your group, having to travel together to wherever your group destination is going to be, that is meaningful downtime that allows you to get to know the people on more of an individual level versus clicking Dungeon Finder, porting there and say, let's go, come on, pull faster.
Right. It's not just like the games that are doing that these days are doing it for basically you get to ride that theme park ride over and over and over again and collect loot versus living an experience. You know, I mean, I can go on many stories of like we're talking about Vanilla WoW, but like it's kind of maybe this is me just being fantastical, but like imagine like if they ever build dungeons that are scale based on like how many people enter the area at the same time. So like normally it's just like a 5-man dungeon. It's an outdoor dungeon or something, and you can go and complete it, and you can do some of the content, and it's a normal 5-man area. But if multiple groups arrive at the same time, they either can compete for that, and it opens up new stuff, or they can come to fight a common enemy, and then form like it's option like an option at that point, like maybe the rallying point or whatever. Now it's a raid, kind of thing. Like they have an option of it forces that functional like traveling plus interacting with possibly enemies and allies or neutrals along the way is part of that experience. The journey of it, whatever you want to call it, it's kind of silly to think about, but it's there's a reason why we play games. It's to try to experience something that we can't do in reality.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of this system and like the way that it would really immerse you in the sort of narrative of like going on this quest with people that you might know or you might be meeting for the first time. Mm-hmm. I think from a practical point of view, I'm always like the boring pragmatist, I guess, when I'm talking about like gameplay systems, but I think there's a couple of things they need to watch out for. And definitely you don't want to lock out people from being able to use the LFG system just because the tables are already in use. So like just because there's 10 tables in the tavern and there's already people sitting at them, like you can't use the system, like that would be bad. You also don't want to have an experience where like in order you want to start a group to do something, you go and sit down at a table and you're just like sitting there with like nothing at all to do for like an hour while you just hope someone else comes and sits down. I think like for better or for worse, I mean, not if you're the only one at the table, like for better or for worse, like modern MMOs have allowed people to do useful things while they're waiting for a group to form. So I'm actually going to stop talking now because sirens are going to pass my apartment.
What I'd like to see about that, so that it needs to facilitate, like you said, like to allow for people to still get into it, but I want it to kind of provide that through that visceral thing. Like maybe what it does is it puts you in at the table. You like you say, if you're the first person to initiate the table, you're the group leader. You put it down, and I'm looking for a 5-man group or whatever group for this dungeon. And basically, what it does is it puts it on an accessible global board that people can be like, okay, I'm going to hit the looking for group tab, and at Tavern Rusty Nail, there is a group of 3 waiting for 2 DPS. Basically, that's all you can glean from that. There's no other information. That basically it draws people to the tavern. Then they can buy the foods and buffs and all that other stuff too, and their way to prepare. They could also maybe gear out or whatever if they're missing pieces, etc.
Check out that battle map,
Right, exactly. They update their map, update their quests, check to see if the board has anything interesting for them that's on the way or whatever. Like maybe the tavern owner wants a hog's head or something, or whatever, and you can kind of add to your to-do list of your play session by doing that. But the global system per zone or per city, I think like if you're within that area, it needs to be like, I'm going to press U. It's going to pull up a social menu or whatever, and there's going to be a button that's like available groups, and you can scroll through and look at that, and it'll tell you where you need to go to get into that, or their name. You can whisper them, and be like, hey, what's up? What do you do? You need this DPS, blah, blah, blah. And you could just have a quick invite and you're ready to go. And then if other people sit down at the tavern table, it'll show them as being in the group, just not present, like.
I do think that they should keep it where it's, you have to physically go there. Because to me, that's like a unique draw,
Well, and to say that, even if you could invite or whisper from a distance, there's very limited fast travel. You're still going to have to travel to meet your party anyway. So I mean, I like the tables as a lore or immersive way of forming groups, but and as Atropos says, and one of the things I'm following, I like the virtual world. I like that idea of that interactive immersiveness, but there is a point where they need to make some concessions. Not a lot, don't get me wrong. We're not going to go into the, nerfing everything down to nothing, but there needs to be a certain level of reasonable expectation for how things are done. And if, like you said, if there's 10 tables and you can't get a group, people are going to go, I'm not sitting here for an hour just to be able to sit there for an hour to advertise my group, right? Like, those are things that they do need to look at. I don't mind the tables, but they need to make it accessible so that you can at least sit and wait for your group.
So that's part of that first, player-driven quest board. Like, what if they could have that as part of it? Basically you could put up your looking for group right there as part of that board. And you could even put like a kicker on there. Hey, I'm willing to pay you so much to group with me. The other thing is, guilds, man. There's lots and lots of guilds are going to be forming in this game. If you don't have luck with finding a group, join a guild. And then that way you could basically have someone to go ahead and play with. That's something that I feel like this game is really trying to encourage. Is basically that community aspect. And people tend to be, I know at least myself, people usually are lazy, right? So you're usually going to take the path of least resistance. If it's something that's easier to just click on your little search bar and say, okay, these people are looking for a group, and all I have to do is whisper them to get the invite, then that's all they're going to do. They're never going to go to the tavern to do that physically.
On that note, can I pose a quick question?
Yeah.
I don't want to steal your job, your role, Aggelos, as the dungeon master, but I'm curious, we're all folks that have guild communities, and, there's going to be lots of people that we are going to know on Discord or, from our larger communities that are playing the game. For someone like us where it's easy for us to form a group, we just go to guild chat, go to the Discord, say all right, let's get together. All right, we've got our group. Should there be a reason or a mechanic that we should have to go sit in the tavern? Or, what would be there for us? Like, what's going to get folks like us into the tavern rather than just, doing it?
So we've kind of already answered that question. The best buffs, the supplies that you can only get from that location, as well as possibly information that you would not have been able to get through just your normal system. If someone's providing, an information broker or whatever might be coming through, and you you may normally talk to them, but you may be able to talk to them first because you're there and you set them, you see them come by. Hey, Steve, what do you got? And they're like, oh, well, we know there's a thorium node over here. You want it? Yeah. Don't even put it up. Don't even, that's the kind of thing that's what you build a relationship. And if you recognize people coming to then post their normal advertisements and stuff for the requisition kind of thing, you just snag them because you're sitting in the tavern. I'm just going to go ahead and sales pitch right now. So my guild will definitely have franchise taverns if it's possible, where the guild hangs out at those taverns for everything in their idle time.
Yeah.
Someone's making Dave and Buster's, but in, Vera.
Hey. whenever you know that you can get the best, crafted materials from the same source, and they're good raiders and are leaders in the economy, why not?
Yeah. Right. Even despite the fact of the meta stuff, Atropos, my main thought, the one thing that would drag me above anything else, is, like you said, food buffs and buffs. You're going in and you get a food buff, when you're at a tavern. Let's say you eat something that gives you 10 strength. If you're out in the field, it's poorly cooked steak because you got a fire or whatever, and it gives you 10 strength. But if you go to a tavern, it's, well-made steak, and it's 10 plus 2, so it's better when it's eaten there. So, of course, you get your buffs there first because they're more powerful. And then if you have to refresh them as you're out and adventuring, you're making do with you're not eating filet mignon, you're eating salted beef, it'll get you through the day, but it's not the same thing.
Plus, add in bard music and stuff. Maybe at a tavern, a bard has a special thing for the music system that allows them to pump their group up way more than they can through a casual buff system.
It's just like Star Wars Galaxies, man, back in the cantina.
I was waiting for someone to say that. Yeah, I was waiting.
It's about time you had someone on this show that knew a little thing or two about Star Wars Galaxies.
Right?
Yeah, it would be nice. But Everyone that plays Star Wars Galaxies apparently has an appointment at 9 p.m. Eastern and can't make it to the shows.
I kind of want to go into one more thing about why guilds would go to taverns. Like, personally, like the prestige of being like a top tier rating guild or being someone that's really well equipped and you can show off what you do like that. And even if you're just going to be just go boast for a day and you're off raid or whatever, you could just go sit down at the tavern on the non-group bench and people would be like, hey, can you come tank for me? Like, I can't, man, sorry. Like, it's just like, it's kind of a dick move, but it's like, they're going to see your gear and be like, man, like it's a jealousy thing, but like that pushes people to want to work harder. Like, if you're showing off, some people don't want to do that, obviously, which I respect completely, but others want to show off their accomplishments. Like if someone knows you're like, here's an example. Like, let's say you're the military node leader through trial by combat. You're chilling out at the tavern. People are going to be like, hey, how'd you do it? Like, give me advice. Like, how do I win? They're going to be constantly bugging you for that kind of thing. And some people like that kind of showmanship. And that's a big reason why people in the upper echelon of the already don't need the group system would come and hang out at a social concentration place like that. So,
yep.
Almost every MMO I know, it's people AFKing outside the bank on their special mount or their armor when just standing there for no other reason than, oh, wow, they have a legendary, They're sitting on top of whatever the mount was, whatever that. Yeah, there is a little bit of that EPing that comes into it. All right, guys, I guess this is going to be the end of our show. And for you listeners, this is almost a double-length episode to make up for the fact that we did not have one last week. So I hope you enjoyed. So before we leave, we're going to do our little shout-outs, let everyone say where they're from, what they're doing, and all that fun stuff. So why don't we go ahead and start with Atropos.
Cool. Thanks, Aggelos. So I'm Atropos, and I hail from Ashen Foundry. It's a community site and a game resource for Ashes of Creation. And, I think we're doing some pretty cool stuff there. It's a publishing platform, so if you're a content creator, whether it's videos or streams or articles or, you just have like a big idea about how things might work in Ashes and you want like a place to write it up and showcase it, we have great tools for that. And as we approach launch, we'll be adding a lot of rich social tools for communities on the site and, some neat things like hopefully game API integrations, stuff like that to just sort of enrich the gameplay experience with Ashes. And, we already have a growing community. We've got a Discord. Hopefully you guys will check us out.
I definitely encourage you to check those out because I'll tell you what, I know Ashes is really far off. We have a pretty dedicated listener base, and it's small still comparatively because the game's not out. But their Tamriel Foundry was amazing. It still is amazing. I shouldn't say was, but that was the go-to hub. I didn't even go to the official forums. The official forums were terrible. I went to Tamriel Foundry for all my theory crafting stuff because that's where the community was, and it was amazing the tools they had. So definitely check out Ashen Foundry. It's growing, and obviously as more tools are available too, I'm not going to say us. I am always used to saying us. I don't do any of this. I make Atropos. Atropos is the smart guy when it comes to that, and I just sit here and use all of it. But it'll definitely grow as more tools are made available to him. So definitely check that out. There you go.
Thank you, sir.
You can pay me later.
Yeah.
And Sindbad.
Cool. Well, I'm Sindbad, one of the leaders of Vengeance. We are a PvX guild made of hardcore players. We're going to be one of the best guilds out there, and we're exclusive to Ashes. So if you're interested in playing with us and interested in being one of the top guilds, come join us. You can visit us at our website, which is vengeanceaoc.com.
Mm-hmm. And Telchar.
My name's Telchar. I'm the guild leader of Sons of the Seven. We're an Ashes exclusive guild as well that's focused on mercantilism and political environments. We have a lot of really experienced players from the broader kind of focused groups in the real world that want to play, their dream game and apply their real life learning skills to the eventual dastardly, knives out kind of gameplay that this game will provide. And we're doing pretty well, and I think that our branding has shown pretty far off, as earlier on the podcast, the guys commented on our guild symbol.
Yeah,
it's been something that I think our group has done a really good job of establishing a brand that we can ride back into the game as we go into the launch. And if you're interested in that kind of gameplay, feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure Aggelos will put our information in the description. So
absolutely. And of course, myself, you can follow me on Twitter at Aggelos, AGGELOS_WOF. Of course, if you're interested in joining the Dungeon Crawler Network as we step forth into Ashes of Creation, you can do that off of our website, dungeoncrawlernetwork.com. You can put in a guild application there. Just, again, a guild update, as what I always say. If you are not already part of our Discord community, which is an open community that you are welcome to join, even if you are part of another guild, which both Sindbad and Telchar are, they're in there and we all communicate and have fun. You can join our greater Discord community, but if you are not part of that and you put in a guild application, please put the number on there because I can't find you afterwards to do an interview. So there you go. You can check all that out. And everything we do, dungeoncrawlernetwork.com. We have all of our podcasts and stuff listed there, as well as links to all of our social media, our Facebook, YouTube, Twitters, all those fun things. Check all that out over there. And we really appreciate you listening to this episode, and we will see you in Ashes of Creation. See you later.